Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us on NTD Television's Capital Report. I'm your host, Steve Lance. Inflation is on the rise again. After a small dip in April, new data from May is revealing that inflation is surging higher than what was expected. Here's NTD's Melina Wisecup with a breakdown on today's data and what President Biden has to say about it.
No good news for your pocketbook today, with latest inflation data showing consumer prices are up 8.6% from a year ago. That's the biggest yearly increase since December of 1981. The president today telling the American people that he understands their pain.
I understand Americans are anxious, and they're anxious for good reason.
Here's where the highest costs are. Meats cost anywhere from 10 to 17% more, and milk is nearly 16% more expensive. Housing is up 5.5%, and your vacation this year could cost nearly double your normal amount, with airline fees up nearly 38%. Core inflation, which excludes food and energy, jumped 0.6% month over month. As for gas prices, 60 cents higher than last month, nearly $2 more than a year ago.
The Saudis raised their prices for oil they're selling to Asia. That tells me I don't really see relief in the near term.
President Biden today continuing to push the same messaging that we've heard all year, pinning blame on Putin and U.S. oil companies.
They talk about how they have 9,000 permits to drill. They're not drilling. I'm doing everything in my power to blunt Putin's price hike.
But experts tell NTD the White House can do more to lower the price at the pump.
At these prices, I think it's fair to say oil companies are trying to produce. It makes business sense. They also are trying to produce natural gas. But you have to get it to market. And so the administration has to be transparent about whether they're also approving permits and licenses for pipelines.
So, Melina, how is the Federal Reserve expected to respond to this record high inflation?
Steve, the Federal Reserve is expected to raise interest rates by at least 50 basis points this month and next month. Now, some economists are predicting and expecting the Fed to raise interest rates by as much as 0.75%. Now, what appears to be certain here is that the Fed will continue to raise these interest rates, but what's uncertain is whether or not we've seen the peak of inflation. Steve, back to you.
The latest consumer price index released today shows inflation is still on the rise. What does this mean for the economy overall? David Brat is a former congressman and is currently the dean of Liberty University's Business School. We're happy to have him on to discuss. Dr. David Brat, thank you so much for joining us on the Capital Report.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
David, the CPI was just released, jumping to 8.6%. This is the highest since 1981. How do you see the consumer price index here affecting the overall economy?
Yeah, well, so the CPI is the measure of inflation. Inflation is not when oil prices go up or formula goes up. It's when the overall price index for the entire country goes up. And so obviously it's devastating, right? It's a hidden stealth tax. If it's going up by about 10%, you're getting a 10% hit there on your spending. And then in addition to that, that's causing the stock market all sorts of grief. And so we're almost in bear market territory there. The market's down about 20% from its highs. And then going back to Milton Friedman, he won the Nobel Prize for inflation and his monetary theory way back in the 60s before the politics went bananas. And he said correctly, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. And so just a couple months ago, the Fed was still printing 24% increases in money supply. Then it went down to 12. But it's not down to 12. It's still 12% increasing the money supply. And so they should be increasing the money supply by the amount of GDP growth you have, which is only about 2%. So they've been printing way too much money. So then you get the inflation. And then Friedman said it's very hard to detect how long the lag is. That will determine how long we're going to live with this beast. But he said anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half. And so this thing is not going away anytime soon. And it's the #1 issue in the polls that is giving many middle-income folks some just terrible life choices at the dinner table between food, medicine. You've read all the stories, right? They're filling up the gas tank to go to work. So it's devastating.
David, if you could advise the president, what would you suggest as to how to turn this thing around?
Yeah, well, my advice is always don't put us in the ditch in the first place. And so, he just reappointed a Fed chair who put us in the ditch. So, you got to scratch your head at that. So my counsel to him is way too late in the game. But, the Taylor rule, John Taylor, who's the greatest monetary guy now out at Stanford, he took over from Friedman, says the interest rate, the Fed funds rate should be at about 7 or 8%, right? So then your car loans are at 10%, your mortgage is even higher if you really want to slow this thing down. So they got to do more than this half-point increase. They're going to have to do a couple full percentage point increases in the interest rate. You first have to get rid of inflation because you're messing with the entire price system of the country. We are rich for the last 200 years because we've chosen to use the price system, otherwise known as free markets or capitalism. But the left hates that, to run our economy. But that's the source of our wealth. And so the interest rate is the price of money, right? It's the amount you got to pay to have money. And so we just distorted the interest rate. The main price in our economy, as I just said, for a decade was zero interest rate policy, which is totally artificial. So you got to end that. And then if you're the president, you should be focusing on K-12. Getting all the from the poor kids all the way up to the high income kids into technical education. So they're skilled up and ready for this advanced economy that they're all going to live in. And we're doing nothing of the sort. So we're in for some tough times.
Dr. David Brat, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Anytime. God bless.
Welcome back to NTD's Capital Report. I'm your host, Steve Lance. Heated reactions on last night's January 6th hearing. And former President Donald Trump is refuting allegations by a top committee member, while President Joe Biden is also chiming in. NTD's Iris Tao brings us more.
Footage and testimony played at the first primetime January 6 hearing have drawn mixed reactions. Democrats say they have laid out facts about former President Donald Trump's role in what they called an insurrection.
This is his own attorney general, a White House counsel, his daughter, for God's sake.
But the person in the center of the spotlight is firing back. Making a flurry of posts on Truth Social, Trump accused the panel of being a, quote, political witch hunt. He also reacted to some of the most high-profile testimonies at the hearing, including one from his daughter.
I respect Attorney General Barr, so I accepted what he was saying.
Ivanka Trump said she agreed with former Attorney General Bill Barr that the 2020 election was not stolen. But Trump said Friday that Ivanka was, quote, not involved in looking at or studying election results, adding that he has, quote, never wavered one bit about what he thought of the election outcome.
Mike Pence, quote, deserves it.
Trump also refuted the claim made by Representative Liz Cheney at the hearing that he backed the phrase "hang Mike Pence," calling it fake news. Meanwhile, President Biden, while saying he did not watch the hearing, had this to say on Friday.
It's important to the American people to understand what truly happened and to understand that the same forces that led January 6th remain at work today.
Meanwhile, Democrats say more is to come for future hearings.
The details that we will be able to fill in with subsequent hearings will be as compelling, I believe, as last night's hearing was.
And after the first hearing, the second and third January 6 hearings are slated for Monday, June 13th and Wednesday, June 15th, respectively. And while an official schedule for the rest of them has not been announced, they're expected to be held throughout June and wrap up in September, right before the November midterms. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
Following the first primetime hearing where the committee highlighted certain parts of January 6th, we have member of the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman Andy Biggs, with us to discuss. Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs, thank you so much for joining us in the Capitol Report.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Congressman, the primetime hearings on January 6th last night, did you learn anything new? Were there any big takeaways for you?
No, there really wasn't anything new, I didn't think. Kind of a kind of a slow-moving, production, if you ask me.
Congressman, as a member of Congress, a member of the House Judiciary Committee, how common is an evening hearing like that that we saw last night?
It's not unusual for us to start a hearing at 10 a.m. and conclude it at 10 p.m. What is unusual is to hire an ABC producer to come in and try to spice it up and turn it into an extravaganza. And that's the only thing different, I think, from normal. Normally, we just do our work and move on.
Congressman, there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not this is an unbiased committee. There are technically 2 Republicans there. What are some of the questions you would have liked to have heard asked or have answered regarding that day?
Well, ultimately, what we need to find out is why didn't Mayor Bowser and Nancy Pelosi accept the proffered and authorized 20,000 National Guards troops from President Trump? I don't know if we're going to find that out, but 4 people testified to this committee that he made that offer. The second thing I think that's so important is why are they not releasing tapes? Why are they selectively releasing video? I mean, even the video that we saw last night is almost identical to other video that's been leaked over time. They just maybe took it from a different angle. There are supposedly 14,000 hours of video. Why are we not seeing all of that? And then the third thing is, why are we not bringing in the FBI and those who concluded that there was no collusion between President Trump and any of these rioters? So, I mean, there's a whole host of things that deal with that I think have got to be revealed. And then, I think there's a lot of individual cases that we look at and we just say, what's going on there? And then I would like to know what's going on with the January 6th defendants and why they've been held, some of them for almost 15, 16 months without a trial.
Congressman, will these hearings ultimately have any impact on the upcoming midterms or even the 2024 presidential election?
I don't think so. I think the reality is most Americans have moved on, and why have they moved on? This is because, in fact, polling indicates that most people don't even think President Trump's responsible at all anymore for this. But when you start examining things, I think people get concerned like I do. I pay $90 now to fill my car up with gas. I'm buying product for paying the same price, but they've either reduced the number of tortillas in the packet I get or the size of the tortillas, which blew my mind when I bought a pack last week. And I think that's what people are concerned about. They're really concerned about inflation. They're really concerned about energy prices, the economy. They're looking at the border and they're saying, what is going on here? They're concerned about high crime rates. They're concerned about our declining prestige internationally. And there's a whole congeries of things that people are concerned about. But most people are not concerned with a riot that took place at the Capitol on January 6, 2021.
Congressman Andy Biggs, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.